6 weeks in a stroke rehabilitation center, and my daughter never once came through that door. Not once. I know because I counted. Every morning when the aide pulled back the curtain and the October light came through that narrow window, I'd look at the door. I told myself she was busy, but told myself she had the kids, had work, had a life. I told myself a lot of things to get through those 42 days. They discharged me on a Tuesday. The nurse handed me a bag with my clothes, a prescription for blood thinners, and a list of follow-up appointments I'd need to schedule myself. My left hand still didn't work quite right. The grip was weak, the fingers slow, like they belonged to someone older than me. Someone further gone. I sat outside the main entrance of the rehabilitation center with my canvas bag at my feet and my phone in my good hand, and called my daughter. It rang 4 times. Voicemail. I called again. 4 rings. Voicemail. I sent a text. They discharged me this morning. I'm outside. Can you come? The reply came 11 minutes later. Dad, I'm so sorry. Work is crazy today. Can you get a lift? I'll Venmo you. I read that 3 times. Then I put the phone in my pocket. I had $63 in my wallet and change in my coat pocket. I hadn't counted yet. The Lyft app on my phone showed the ride to my house. 41 miles out past the county line, down roads with no sidewalks and neighbors who kept chickens, would cost somewhere between $55 and $70, depending on traffic. I did the math. I sat there and did the math at 67 years old, after a stroke that had temporarily stolen my ability to form words. Sitting outside a rehabilitation center with a bag of clothes and $63, and I did the math and came up short. I didn't call her back. What was I going to say? The October wind came off the parking lot in gusts carrying fast food wrappers and the smell of diesel from the road. I pulled my jacket tighter. It was the same jacket I'd been wearing when the ambulance brought me in 6 weeks ago. A brown canvas Carhartt I'd had for 15 years, still broken in just right across the shoulders. The paramedics had cut my shirt open, but left the jacket. Small mercies. I'd been sitting there maybe 20 minutes when I heard footsteps slow on the pavement beside me. Excuse me, are you Gus? I looked up. A woman stood a few feet away, maybe late 40s, wearing scrubs under an open fleece jacket. She had her ID badge still clipped to her chest even though her shift was clearly over, and she was looking at me with an expression I couldn't immediately read. Careful. Like she was trying to figure something out. I'm Gus, I said. Her face changed. Oh my God. She pressed her hand over her mouth for a second. You don't remember me. Why would you? I was 8 years old. I looked at her more carefully. Brown hair going grey at the temples, tired eyes, a small scar above her left eyebrow that pulled slightly when she smiled. Mira Sandoval, she said. My mum was Elena Sandoval. You were our neighbor on Ridgecrest Avenue, the Blue House. The Blue House. I felt something shift in my chest. The particular movement of a memory surfacing after years underwater. Little Mira, I said. From the corner. She laughed, and for just a second she looked exactly like the kid I remembered. Knobby-kneed, always on a bicycle, always waving from the end of their driveway. I go by Miriam now, professionally. But yeah. She glanced at my bag, at the door behind me, at the parking lot. Did someone just drop you off or waiting on a ride? I said. She looked at me for a moment, the way people look at you when they know you're not telling the whole truth. I work here, she said. Physical therapy. I saw you in the hall a few times last week, but I wasn't sure. You look different than I remember. 30 years will do that. What happened, if you don't mind me asking? Stroke, I said. 6 weeks ago. I'm sorry. She said it simply, without the performance people sometimes attach to it. Just 2 words, steady, like she meant them. How are you getting home? I opened my mouth to say I was fine, that I had it handled, that the ride was just running late. The words were right there, the same reassurance I'd been rehearsing for 20 minutes. But something about the way she asked, not prying, not pitying, just asking, made them dissolve before I could use them. I'm working on it, I said. She sat down on the bench beside me without asking permission. My shift ended an hour ago. I stayed to finish some notes. She looked at the parking lot. Where do you live? I told her. She nodded slowly, doing her own math. "I'm going roughly that direction," she said. "I drive out past Miller's Junction every week to see my mother. You may be 15 minutes out of my way." "I can't ask you to do that." "You didn't ask," she said. "I offered." We sat in silence for a moment. A man in a wheelchair was being helped into a van 20 feet away. His family surrounded him, 4 or 5 people, a little kid tugging at someone's sleeve. "Your daughter was supposed to come?" Miriam said quietly. I didn't answer right away. "She's busy," I said finally. Miriam nodded once and didn't press. "Come on," she said, standing and picking up my bag before I could stop her. "My car's in Knot C." We didn't talk much on the drive out. The highway gave way to county roads, the county roads to 2-lane stretches lined with pine and post oak, and somewhere in that transition I felt my shoulders drop in a way they hadn't in 6 weeks. Just the familiar shape of home ground moving past the window. "Your parents still in the blue house?" I asked. "Mum is. Dad passed about 12 years ago. I'm sorry. He was a good man." "He was," she said. "He always talked about you. Said you were the one neighbor who treated them like people when they first moved in." I remembered that. 1987 or so, Elena and Roberto Sandoval had pulled a moving truck up to the corner house at a time when the neighborhood wasn't exactly welcoming to a family from Albuquerque with a different last name than everybody else. I'd gone over with a 6-pack and helped Roberto carry boxes for an afternoon. It hadn't felt like anything special at the time. It was just the right thing to do. "How do you end up in physical therapy?" I asked. "Your wife," she said. I went still. She was always asking how I was doing, what I wanted to be. One summer, I must have been 10, she saw me trying to help a bird with a broken wing. She said, "Mira, you've got healer hands." I never forgot that. She paused. I was so sorry when she passed. "My mother told me." 5 years ago," I said. "Pancreatic cancer. 18 months from diagnosis too." I stopped. Even now the sentence didn't have an ending I could say out loud. "I know," Miriam said. "I'm so sorry." We turned onto my road. The gravel crunched under the tires and the pines closed in on either side. And then we came around the bend. And my house appeared at the end of the long drive. I felt the bottom drop out of my stomach. The front porch was sagging on one side, not dramatically. The post was still upright, but something was wrong with the way it sat, the angle slightly off. The garden my wife had kept, the one that ran along the south wall of the house, was overgrown to the point of erasure. Weeds had come up through the flagstone path and closed over it entirely. One of the shutters on the front window was hanging wrong, tilted, like it had been hit, and never straightened. But what made my throat close was the mailbox. It was at the end of the drive, a simple black post-mounted box I'd put in years ago. It was stuffed so full the door wouldn't shut. Envelopes and catalogues had spilled out and lay in a wet pile on the ground beneath it, softened by rain, turning to paper paste. 6 weeks. My house had been sitting here for 6 weeks. Miriam pulled to a stop at the end of the drive, and neither of us moved. "Mr. Gus," she said quietly, "when was the last time someone was here?" "My daughter was supposed to check in," I said. My voice came out flat in a way I didn't intend. "Water the plants. Collect the mail." The plants. I almost laughed. The plants were long dead. "I'd like to come inside with you," Miriam said, "if that's all right." The front door opened fine. I had my key, but the smell hit us immediately. Stale air, the particular staleness of a house that's been closed up and left, with something under it that I couldn't immediately identify, something sweet and wrong. I hit the light switch by the door. Nothing. I tried again. The house stayed dark. "Power's off," I said. Miriam pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight. We moved through the front hall into the kitchen, and the smell got worse. I opened the refrigerator and immediately shut it again. Whatever had been in there when I left for the hospital had been sitting in the dark and the warmth for 6 weeks. On the kitchen counter, mail was piled in 2 stacks, not the overflow from the mailbox. This was interior mail, things that had been brought inside and just set down weeks ago and never dealt with. The top envelopes had turned soft from the condensation in the air. I picked up the stack and started going through it slowly, my weak hands struggling with the weight. Bills. A notice from the electric company dated 5 weeks ago, a final warning before disconnection, a letter from my bank, 2 pieces certified mail I hadn't signed for, which meant the postal carrier had tried the door and gotten no answer. My daughter had not been here, not once. I set the mail down and stood in my dark kitchen and looked at the grey light coming through the window over the sink. The window my wife had put a little ceramic rooster on the sill of, because she said it made her happy in the mornings, and the rooster was still there, dusty now, tilted slightly toward the glass. "Mr. Goss," Miriam's voice was careful. "I think you should sit down. I'm fine standing." A pause. Then, gently, "Who has access to your accounts? While you were in the center, who was handling your finances?" I looked at her. "My daughter," I said slowly. "I gave her access. Last year, after the first episode, I had a small episode before the stroke, a TIA, the doctors called it. She said she wanted to be able to help if anything happened." Miriam nodded. She didn't say anything else, but I could see her doing the same math I was doing. The power had been cut. The certified letters were unopened. The mail had piled for weeks. And my daughter had been wiring herself money from my account. She'd offered to manage expenses while I recovered, and I had let her because she was my daughter and I trusted her. And that is the kind of stupidity that feels like love until it doesn't. "I need to look at my bank statements," I said. "Do you have a laptop, paper statements, office in the back?" The office was where my wife had done her bookkeeping, kept the household files, managed the business end of everything because I was always better with my hands than with numbers. She'd died, and I'd taken over, and never quite gotten the system right, which is how a 67-year-old man ends up in the dark, holding a stack of soggy mail, not fully understanding what's been done to him. Miriam helped me find the file box. We sat on the floor of the office with her phone flashlight propped against a book, going through paper statements because the laptop needed power and the power was off. 6 weeks of statements, or rather, the absence of 6 weeks of statements. The last printed statement I had was from 3 months before my stroke. Everything after that would be digital, which I couldn't access without power, without internet, without my reading glasses, which was somewhere in my rehabilitation bag, still in Miriam's car. But the last paper statement told enough of a story. There were 2 transfers I didn't recognize. Small ones, $200, then $350, dated about 2 weeks before my stroke. My daughter, testing, maybe, seeing if I'd notice. "Miriam," I said quietly, "when you were growing up, did your dad ever have to fight someone in his own family for what was his?" She was quiet for a moment. "Yes," she said finally, "after his mother passed. One of his brothers." "What did he do?" "He got a lawyer," she said, "and he didn't talk about it. He just did it. He said the worst thing you can do is give someone time to move money around." I held the statement in my good hand and looked at it. "I need to call someone," I said. The next morning, Miriam had called the power company, paid the reconnection fee herself, argued with the automated system for 45 minutes until she got a human being on the line, and refused to leave until the lights were back on. I sat at my kitchen table with my phone and called the bank. It took 3 transfers and 22 minutes to reach someone with the authority to read me my own account history for the past 6 weeks. $11,400. Gone in 12 separate transactions, all authorized through the secondary access my daughter had on the account. Small enough amounts, spread across enough days that no single one would have triggered an automatic fraud alert. Grocery stores, gas stations, a spa in the town where she lived, 2 car payments that were not for any car I owned. I wrote down every number on a legal pad. My hand shook, but the pen moved. When I hung up, I sat there for a long time listening to the refrigerator, which Miriam had emptied and scrubbed the night before and was now running clean and cold and empty. I looked at the ceramic rooster on the windowsill. My wife had bought it at a farm stand in Vermont on our anniversary trip, the one where we'd stayed at that old inn, and it had rained the whole weekend, and we hadn't cared. She would have known what to do. She had always known. I picked up the phone and called Miriam. "I need a lawyer," I said when she answered. "A good one. Someone who handles elder financial abuse." "I know someone," she said without hesitation. "She helped a patient of mine last year. Same situation, different family. Her name is Catherine Drexler. She's in town. Do you want her number?" "Yes," I said. Catherine Drexler turned out to be a compact, direct woman in her late 50s who wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck and had the particular manner of someone who has heard every version of every family betrayal there is and has stopped being surprised by any of them, but has not stopped being angry. She came to my house that Friday. I made coffee. She sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and asked questions for 90 minutes without seeming to stop for air. At the end, she folded her pad closed and looked at me over her glasses. "Your daughter has secondary access on a checking and a savings account," she said. "She's withdrawn approximately $11,000 over 6 weeks, using amounts calibrated to avoid triggering fraud detection. She let the power get cut, didn't collect your mail, didn't visit, and when pressed will almost certainly claim she was managing household expenses under a verbal agreement you made." "I never agreed to anything like that." "I know, but she'll say you did." Catherine took off her glasses and held them. "Mr. Gus, has your daughter ever mentioned your house, the property?" I went still. "She's mentioned it," I said carefully. "She's mentioned, when her mother passed, she mentioned that the house should stay in the family. She said it a few times, that she wanted to make sure it was protected." "Protected from what?" "I never asked." Catherine nodded slowly. "How large is the property?" "House and 4 acres. Separate garage, detached shop out back where I do my woodworking." I paused. "My wife and I built the shop together. We put it up the second summer we owned the house, 31 years ago. Catherine was writing. What's the property worth, roughly? I had it appraised 2 years ago, just over $400,000 for everything." She wrote that down. Then she looked up. "When were you admitted to the stroke center?" "September 3rd. I'm going to request your financial records going back 12 months, she said. "And I'm going to contact the bank directly. There's something I want to check." She paused. "Has anyone, since your stroke, asked you to sign anything?" I thought about it. "My son-in-law came to the rehabilitation center," I said slowly. 3 weeks in, I remember being surprised because my daughter hadn't come. But he did. He brought flowers, which I thought was, I stopped. He had some papers. He said they were for my insurance, that they needed a signature to process the continued stay benefits. I was on medication. I was tired. I signed. Catherine's expression didn't change, but something in it sharpened. "Do you remember what you signed?" He said it was insurance paperwork. "Did you read it?" I looked out the window. My reading glasses were in a bag somewhere. He read me what he said it said. I signed where he pointed. Catherine wrote something, then underlined it twice. "I'd like to see your mail," she said. "All of it." She stayed another 3 hours, going through every piece of mail on the kitchen counter. Then the stack I'd brought in from the box at the end of the drive. Then the 2 pieces of certified mail I'd missed. The certified mail was what broke it open. The first piece was from a title company in the county seat. It was a notification of a lien placed against the property, dated 4 weeks after my admission to the stroke center. The lien was for $85,000 secured against the house and land. I had not taken out a loan. My son-in-law had signed it. He had signed it with my name. "This is forgery," I said. "Yes," Catherine said. "He forged my signature on a lien against my own property." "Yes." I sat with that for a moment. The ceramic rooster on the windowsill, the sound of the refrigerator. "What do they need $85,000 for?" I asked, though some part of me already suspected. Catherine had already opened the second certified piece of mail. She read it, then set it down and turned it toward me. It was a notice from a debt collection agency, my son-in-law's name, my daughter's name, and a balance of $120,000 on a line of credit that had been defaulted on 18 months ago. "They're drowning," I said. "They've been drowning," Catherine said, "and they decided the solution was your house." I drove past my daughter's house once that week, just to see. I didn't stop. I just drove slowly down her street in the early morning, the way you do when you're trying to make something real that your mind keeps refusing. It was a nice house, newer than mine, smaller than mine, in a subdivision where all the houses looked like slight variations of each other. There were potted mums on the front steps, orange and yellow, the kind of thing you put out when you want people to think everything is fine. 2 cars in the driveway, both newer than anything I drove. A basketball hoop at the edge of the concrete, the kind you can adjust for height for when my grandsons visited. My grandsons, who I taught to fish in the pond on my property, whose drawings were still on my refrigerator, held up by magnets shaped like the state of Texas. I drove home. Catherine filed a motion to revoke the fraudulent lien within 10 days. She also contacted the bank and placed a protective freeze on both accounts, removing my daughter's secondary access. She sent a formal letter to my daughter and son-in-law informing them that their conduct was under legal review. My daughter called me that afternoon, 12 rings before I answered. Dad. Her voice was tight, controlled. What is going on? I got a letter from some attorney. Dad, this is insane. I was trying to help you. You were trying to help yourself, I said. That's not. Dad, you don't understand the position we've been in. The loan wasn't supposed to. We were going to pay it back before you even got out. We panicked, okay? The collection agency threatened to garnish, and we panicked. You put a lien on my house, sweetheart, your mother's house. Silence. That money you took from the account, I said. What was that for? Expenses. Your house expenses. Heaping the utilities. She stopped herself. Okay, the utilities weren't. I know how that looks, but we were going to fix it before you came home. I just ran out of time, and then they called and said you were being discharged, and you told me to get a lift. She didn't answer. You didn't visit me, I said. Not once in 6 weeks. I counted. Dad, you need to talk to Catherine Drexler. Her number's in that letter. You and your husband need to get a lawyer and talk to Catherine. This is going to the state attorney general if it doesn't get handled properly. I paused, and until that happens, I'd like you not to contact me. I hung up. That night, I sat in the shop out back, where I go when I need to think with my hands instead of my head. The stroke had taken some of my left side grip, and I wasn't sure yet how much I'd get back, but I could still hold a piece of sandpaper, could still move it along the grain of a board in the slow, even strokes my father had taught me. I was working on a blanket chest. I'd started the spring before, white oak, nothing fancy, just a clean box with good joinery. My wife used to come out here and sit on the stool in the corner and just be here while I worked. She never felt like she had to talk. She'd bring 2 cups of coffee, set mine on the corner of the bench, and read her book or just look out the window at the back field while the light changed. Some of my best memories are of not much more than that. The smell of sawdust. 2 cups of coffee, the sound of someone you love breathing in the same room. I thought about what it would cost them, the debt, the lien, the lawyer, the lien bee, lawyerable legal process that Catherine was now setting in motion. I thought about my grandsons, who hadn't done anything, who still drew pictures and brought them to me, folded up in their pockets. I thought about the 4 acres, the pond, the shop where I was sitting, the things my wife and I had built together, that I'd always assumed would go to my daughter, because where else would they go? I thought about Miriam, who had sat on the floor of my office in the dark holding a phone flashlight while I went through paper statements, who had scrubbed my refrigerator at 10 o'clock at night without being asked, who had texted the next morning to check on me before her shift. I thought about her father, Roberto, carrying boxes in the August heat 35 years ago because someone had offered to help. Kindness travels, my wife used to say. Sometimes it just takes a long time to come back around. The legal process took 4 months. I won't pretend it was simple or clean, or that it resolved without cost, because none of those things are true. My daughter and son-in-law hired an attorney who attempted 3 separate strategies to characterize the transactions as legitimate, and Catherine demolished each one methodically. The lien was formally voided. The $11,000 withdrawn from the accounts was repaid through a structured agreement that my daughter's attorney negotiated down on her behalf, which I accepted because Catherine advised me to, and because the alternative was a protracted civil suit that would have cost me more in time and peace than the money was worth. My son-in-law was a different matter. The forged signature on the lien document was a felony. Catherine referred the matter to the district attorney's office with a full file of documentation. The DA reviewed it for 6 weeks and then offered a plea: no prison, but 5 years probation, community service, and permanent prohibition from serving in any fiduciary capacity. He took the deal. My daughter was not charged. She had not signed the lien document. Catherine believed she knew about it, and I believe she knew about it, but belief and proof are different things, and I had made peace with the difference. What I had not made peace with, and what I am not sure I ever will make peace with, was simpler than any of that. She didn't come to the door. Not once in 6 weeks. Not a Tuesday, not a Sunday, not a random Wednesday, when she happened to be passing. Not when I was relearning how to form words after the stroke stole my speech for 9 days. Not when I was doing the exercises that made my shoulder burn. Not when I lay awake in that narrow bed wondering if I was going to be 67 years old for the rest of my life, or if the man I used to be was still somewhere in there waiting. She didn't come, and when I finally walked out of that building with $63 and a canvas bag, she told me to get a lift. I don't know what I would have done if Miriam hadn't been there. Probably figured something out, probably managed. I've managed things before, but I know I would have come home to a dark house, alone, and I don't know what that would have done to me. I know what it almost did. 2 things happened in the spring after the legal proceedings concluded. The first was that Miriam's mother, Elena, fell and broke her hip. The recovery was long, and Miriam was commuting 90 minutes each way to be with her on weekends, which was what Miriam did because Miriam was that kind of person. I started going with her sometimes when the drive felt too long to do alone. Elena remembered me vaguely from Ridgecrest Avenue, remembered my wife more clearly, and liked to hold court from her recliner and talk about the old neighborhood, who had lived where, which families had come and gone. I would sit across from her and drink her terrible instant coffee and listen. And it was, unexpectedly, one of the better ways I'd found to spend a Saturday. The second thing was that my daughter called 6 months after the legal matter was resolved and asked if she could come over. I thought about it for 3 days before I answered. I said yes, not because everything was forgiven. It wasn't, not fully, maybe not ever. But because she was my daughter, and because my grandsons were still growing up, and because I had watched a woman I loved die knowing she had left things unresolved between her and the people she loved, and I did not want to carry that same weight. I did not want to be 80 years old in a dark room somewhere wondering what would have happened if I'd picked up the phone. She came on a Sunday in April. She sat at my kitchen table, and I made coffee, and she cried, which I had not expected. Not the controlled, defended crying of someone trying to get something from you, but the ugly crying of someone who has finally run out of room to run from themselves. She said she was sorry. I said I knew. She said she didn't know how they had gotten to where they had gotten. She said it had happened slowly, the debt, the decisions, the compromises they had made one at a time until they had made too many to count. She said she knew that wasn't an excuse. She said it a lot of times, that she knew it wasn't an excuse, like she was trying to outrun the excuse she was also still half making. I let her talk. When she was done, I told her about the lien document. That I had seen it. That I knew what it meant for her to have known about it, and not told me. That I was going to need time before any of this felt like solid ground. She nodded. She didn't argue. "Your mother would have known what to do with me," she said quietly. "Probably," I said. "She was better at this than I am. She would have been so disappointed in me." I looked at my daughter across the kitchen table, at the face I had known since it was a few hours old, at the woman who had let me sit outside a rehabilitation center with $63 and told me to get a lift, and I thought about what my wife would actually have said. Not the version you say to be kind. The real version. She would have been, I said, but she also would have been the first one to tell you to stop punishing yourself past the point of usefulness. She had a low tolerance for guilt that didn't lead anywhere. My daughter laughed just briefly, and then she pressed her hand over her eyes. We didn't fix everything that afternoon. We didn't fix most of it. But we sat in the kitchen for 2 hours, and we were honest with each other in a way we probably hadn't been in years. And when she left, she hugged me for a long time at the door. And I let her. The shop is finished now. I added a new work table on the east side, wider than the old one, with better light. My left hand is about 80% of what it was. The occupational therapist says I may get another 5 or 10% back over the next year, and I've decided to believe her. I've learned to compensate. You make adjustments. You work around what's not there anymore, and you use what is. Miriam comes by sometimes in the evenings, after her shift. She'll bring takeout and sit at the kitchen table while I finish up in the shop, and then we'll eat, and she'll tell me about her patients, not the details, just the shape of the day, and I'll tell her what I'm building. It's not complicated. It doesn't need to be. Her mother gave me a plant last month, a small potted rosemary on the windowsill of the kitchen. She said my wife would have liked it there. She was right. I look at it in the morning sometimes, next to the ceramic rooster. 2 small things that found their way back to where they belonged.